Hopefully you feel you're getting to grips with Excel Database Formulae, and in this video we're going to move on to even more powerful formulae to allow us to get even more sophisticated analysis about our data set. So let's get straight into it, and you'll see we've done the first 5 questions, so fairly simple queries there. We've dealt with COUNTA, COUNTIF, the SUM formula, and then in the previous video SUMIF and AVERAGEIF. So we're moving on to question 6 now, and what's interesting about question 6 is the gender balance the same across regions. What's interesting for us is we're specifying 2 criteria there. We're talking about gender and we're also talking about the region. So how do we deal with that? We've got multiple criteria. We're going to look at COUNTIFs, SUMIFs and AVERAGEIFS to help us deal with this kind of situation. So as before, let's copy paste the question onto the analysis sheet, onto question 6 now. Control V just to paste that in. So is the gender balance the same across regions? Well, it's a sensible start to create the table. So I'm going to copy paste north, south, east, west here. Then we're going to begin with the COUNTIFS formula. So we're talking about gender balance. So we're not performing an operation on these cells. We're not looking to sum up the gender column. We're not looking to sum up what's in the cells in the gender column. We're not looking to find the average of the data in the gender column. We're just looking to count. So how many males, how many females, how many others are there? We're looking to count the contents of this column. So let's go for COUNTIFs. COUNTIFs plural, COUNTIFs plural, so with an S on the end. Then we've got our prompts as usual, and we talk about 2 ideas here. So a criteria range and a criteria. We're already familiar with the concept of a criteria. That's the piece of data that allows us to distinguish between what we want to include and what we want to exclude. And here we're talking about multiple criteria, and then criteria range. So where is that specific criteria? Now with COUNTIFs, we can specify multiple criteria. So we're going to need a criteria range and a criteria for however many criteria we're talking about. We're talking about 2 criteria. So we're going to have criteria range, criteria, criteria range, criteria. That's the basic structure of the formula. So let's get started. So firstly, criteria range 1. So let's go for gender first. This is the first thing we're looking at in the question. So I've got to go to the database, find the column that I'm interested in. We're talking about gender. So column F, then top of the column, first piece of data, Control Shift down cursor takes me to the bottom of the column. I'm going to hit the F4 key now. That's going to give me absolute references. That's going to help us later on when we're copy pasting this formula around. And then hit the comma key, and I can see Excel is now asking for criteria 1. Okay, so let's start with male. So I'm going to put an M in there, so this is going to count the males. Then the second part of the question is about the region. So again, we want criteria range and criteria, the same setup. But where's our criteria range this time? Well, we're going to be looking at region. So this column here, currently obscured, EFG. Column G is the region column. So Control Shift down cursor takes us down to the bottom. What do we do now when we're working with database formulae? Put the absolute references in. That's going to help us later on. And then for the criteria, I can type in fact, at this point, let's just type in north. So we can see both of our criteria typed, like manually entered into the formula there, the M for male and north, both in speech marks. Then close the bracket and just hit enter. We've got 32. So what we're saying, according to our formula, there's 32 in the north region, there's 32 males. So let's check this back to the data. Now the data's already sorted in terms of region. So I just need to find north, going down the database here. Need to find north. Where does north start? It starts here. Then I want to count the number of males. So we'll put a quick COUNTIF formula in here. And the range is going to be down the database again. The range is going to be where the north starts, which is just here. But I'm not interested in that column, I'm interested in the gender column. So holding down the shift key, moving down the database to the bottom of the north data. That's the range we want to look at, just the north data. The criteria looking at males. So we've returned a value of 32. So we're actually using a formula we've learnt previously in the series to validate a formula we're trying to learn now. So it's a kind of nice way to consolidate the learning there. So we've got a value of 32. Back to the analysis sheet, we can see we've got a value of 32 here. So I'm happy with that, done a validation, checked it with another technique, building confidence in this analysis using the COUNTIFS formula. So how can we improve this analysis? Well, ideally, we'd have a table here, north, south, east, west, and then across the top, we've got male, female. What are the other possible entries? Looking at the lists on the list sheet, the other possible entry here is other. So male entry and other. I'm just going to check that on the database because I think there might be some other entries here. Okay, no answer is another possible entry here. So I'm going to put no answer as well. There we go. So this is the kind of setup we want. So we've got the possible criteria for one column in the column there of the table, and possible criteria for another column in the row there of the table. So now, how can we get this formula working, drag it across the whole table to get the analysis we need? What would we need to change in this formula to make it happen? You might want to stop the video, try to do it yourself. Well, this M, rather than typing that in manually, it'll be much better to just reference a cell there. Now we've got to think very carefully about the references, because a relative reference with no dollar signs as it is now, that's clearly not going to do the job here, because as we copy the formula down, we want to maintain the reference to this cell here. So we're going to need an absolute reference, some kind of absolute reference. We don't want a full absolute reference because we do want to be able to drag this formula across as well. So we actually want a partial absolute reference here. Partial absolute reference. If we hit the F4 key, this gives us a full absolute reference. If we hit it again, this is what we're interested in, a partial absolute reference. We're just fixing the row here, fixing the row. The other partial absolute reference would fix the column. There we can see the dollar sign just to the left of the C. Hit the F4 key, toggle through the options. This is what we're interested in this case. Now, personally, it took me a long time to understand the differences between the partial absolute references. And so don't worry if you don't get it straight away. I really recommend trial and error. Don't worry too much about getting it right first time. Try one of the references with the F4 key, copy it across. It'll take you 2 seconds to copy it across. Is it right? If it's not right, then just try the next one. It's likely to be right. That's how I developed a sense of what was required in terms of partial absolute references. So I'm going to pop this in here and then just drag this down the database. Now we can see we've got the same value 4 times. Why is that? Well, this last component of the formula, we also want to make this refer to a range, refer to a cell, so that this north value changes as it goes down the table. So again, just select north, and then again, we're going to need a partial absolute reference here, but we want the other kind, the other partial absolute reference is reference fixing the column there. So the dollar sign to the left of the column reference, that's going to fix the column for us. And then enter, so copy this down. Now we've got, different values now, so this looks good. So how might we validate this? So Alt plus, so it's saying there's a total of 118 males in the database. So let's go back to the database, check this. Okay, I'm just going to change this reference to the whole gender column, again using the COUNTIF formula to validate what we've done. So put a COUNTIF formula in there. 118 it's saying. Let's cross-reference that, check that. We've also got 118 here. So validated that validated that formula, developing confidence in the analysis. So now we've got our partial absolute references in place. Also worth checking the database references. You'll need absolute references here. And there we go. That seems to be right. So feeling fairly confident about this, but again, just save the file, Control S, save the file, and then just try it. You know, don't get too, well, my approach anyway, don't get too kind of lost in the detail, trying to get everything right. Try it out. If it's not working, you're going to be able to diagnose what's wrong and then go ahead from there. So let's try it out. Okay, so what have we got? I'm just going to check these formulae, hit the F2 key, and that's going to show where the references are. This seems to be correct. So those partial absolute references seem to be doing the job. And then, yeah, we've got the information we need. So if we add up all of this table, so I'll do that quickly here. Let's go Control key, sum up the whole table. We've got 250. We know previously from the analysis that there are 250 entries in the whole table. So that's a nice way for us to validate what's going on here. Yep, every entry in the table should have something in the gender column. Therefore, if this analysis is correct and it does look accurate, the sum of all the analysis should be 250. So this is looking pretty good so far. Okay, so we're going to stop it there. This video, that's the COUNTIFS formula. So lots to take in there. Quite intricate putting this formula together. The references have got to be right. Then we've spoken about building a table and having partial absolute references for the column, partial absolute references for the row. So it's quite intricate getting all that correct, making it all accurate, making it work. So I really recommend downloading the file, following the video very closely, making sure those references are correct. Also downloading the completed file, because remember you can download the completed file from the website too, comparing yours with the completed file. That will help you diagnose if you've got any problems at all. So going back to our key questions, we've got question 6 is now done. So in the next video, we're going to move on to question 7, question 8, where we're talking about SUMIFS, AVERAGEIFS, 2 more super powerful formulae, going to save you loads of time when working with databases. See you in the next video.